Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, the show that takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible.
Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. Hello, everybody. How is it going today? I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Happy Monday. Happy fresh start to a new week, which is so exciting. You guys know how much I love my Mondays. Just feels like a brand new opportunity to go after your goals, to be productive, get organized, just to have a good time. So I just love Mondays. So happy Monday to everybody. Today I have lots of good information to share with you. And I'm super excited about it. So speaking of goals and going after your dreams and being productive and organized, all of that can come with, of course there's positive and negatives to everything. But all of that, if we overwork ourselves, that can result in a burnout. And a burnout is, I guess it can mean a few different things. It basically is the loss of meaning in your work. So that's kind of contributing to mental, emotional, or physical exhaustion. And that's usually of a result of a long-term or unresolved stress. So we've all probably experienced some kind of burnout in our lives. Sometimes, though, it can be quite drastic. And technically, this is not really a mental diagnosis, but a lot of psychologists believe that it could arguably be a diagnosable disorder. So it is very prevalent. It happens a lot. The thing with a burnout, it's not just being tired. It's not just being exhausted. Like it is. I'm going to go through it today. Today I'm going to walk you through kind of what exactly a burnout is. I'm going to give you the common symptoms for a burnout. I'm going to give you the 5 main stages of a burnout, just in case you can recognize any of those things in yourself. And then, of course, like always, I'm also going to be giving you some tips and tricks of how to prevent a burnout, how to kind of get out of that state. We'll go through some surprising causes of a burnout, just in case you can recognize any of those things in your life as well. The thing with a burnout, it's not just like, oh, I need to sleep for a weekend. It is like, it's exhaustion, like pure, like aggressive exhaustion where you just cannot basically do anything. And it can really lead you down a path of depression. It can really result in anxiety disorders coming up. A lot of other mental health problems could come to the surface if you do let yourself completely burn out. And you've probably heard this term of just like, a little more casually, like, oh, I'm burning out. Like I burnt out. I've been working so hard. I burnt out. And there's a difference between that and an actual burnout. So I'm going to be going through that today with you. I just think this subject's super important to talk about because it does happen to everybody in a certain kind of way for different people. Like I said, some people will be more intense than others. But at some point in our lives, we do experience a burnout. And in our society today, success and everything, we really pay attention to being busy, especially with our work lives, and we see busy as successful, and we see that we have to be, striving and reaching our goals 24/7 all the time, and if you don't, you might feel anxious, you feel like you're falling behind, and, we just live in a world where that's just kind of how it works these days, and there's definitely pros and cons. I think we should always be going after our goals and trying to stay on track and achieving those things that we want out of life. But of course, we have to have that happy balance. And a burnout isn't just like exhaustion of life. Like a burnout, it's really important to note that a burnout is actually like distinctive to your work aspect of your life. Like you're not going to burn out in like a social aspect. Like it's strictly because you're overworking yourself for your career or whatever you're doing. But we have all had this happen in our lives, and it's not recognized as a disorder in the US, but it actually is recognized as a disorder in Sweden, and it's in the International Classification of Diseases as a state of vital exhaustion. So you might have heard that term for it as well. So even though it is not technically a diagnosable disorder in the US, saying that it is a disorder in Sweden and it is in the International Classification of Diseases, it's important, and that's why it's important to talk about, because it does happen, and it kind of can come out of nowhere sometimes. You don't really realize that you're about to spiral into a burnout, which is why I'm going to walk you through the symptoms, the stages, some of the surprising causes of a burnout. Hopefully you can recognize some of these in your life and prevent it before it gets any worse. So let's jump right into it. I got lots of information. For a lot of people, so it can happen to anyone, like I've said, but it is most common in people between the ages of 25 and 44, they say. Usually because this is like kind of your peak time of your career. You might be working really, really hard either to get to that point that you want to, or just trying to obtain that job or sustain the dream job that you have. So it usually ranges between 25 and 44. But remember, it can happen to anyone at any point in their life. And it happens a lot more than we think. It can affect everyone, but there is a growing number of entrepreneurs, business owners, and freelancers who are reporting symptoms of a burnout. That's up to about 60% in the UK. And this is because entrepreneurs, business owners, freelancers, right? You're usually your own boss. And it's quite easy to overload your schedule with work because you always have so many things to do, right? And you're kind of in charge of your own schedule. And sometimes you just go full force because it's just like, it's your baby, it's your dream, it's what you're doing. And happens to everyone, even if you're not an entrepreneur or freelance or anything like that. But it is a rising number in those people just because they have a lot on their plate. They want to get a lot done. Usually those people are pretty independent and they just want to be able to do their work whenever they want to do their work, which results into an overworkload. So, and it can actually commonly be confused with depression. Like I said, near the end of a burnout, when it gets to really, really bad burnout, and it can turn into depression and other mental illnesses. But it can also just commonly be confused with depression. But it is just distinct to your work aspect of your life. And people think of it this way. So people who are depressed, they're going to still be depressed while sitting on a tropical beach, right? It's depression. That's just what it is. But those with a burnout, they often feel like if they are sitting on a tropical beach, they feel better. A vacation makes them feel better. So that's just to show you kind of the difference between them, because people can commonly get them confused. So what are 3 common symptoms for a burnout? Well, it is different for everybody, but these are the basic symptoms that I'm going to talk about, and then I'll jump into the basic 5 stages of a burnout. So common symptoms is emotional exhaustion. So this can also bleed into physical exhaustion as well, right? So with this symptom, you're basically dragging yourself to work. It's a heroic effort to get yourself to work, and being productive is just like out of the question because you're so mentally, emotionally exhausted. Like your brain is literally not functioning properly because you're just so drained. The next common symptom would be reduced personal accomplishment. So this means that it's exactly what it sounds like. Basically, it takes more effort to get less done. And then you kind of just like wonder, like, what is the point anyways? You're basically dragging your butt and you do not feel accomplished whatsoever. Even success can feel kind of awful in this symptom, in this stage of a burnout, just because you just don't care. You're like, why do I even bother with this? Like, nothing's getting done. I am not feeling well. Like, there's just no kind of oomph. There's no extra push, no extra motivation in you. And then the third common symptom for a burnout is called depersonalization. So that means that you're being cynical, critical, and resentful with coworkers and clients. So this means, like, if you're ever muttering under your breath, like, oh, these people are idiots, like, I'm so annoyed, like, no one can do anything right, like, just those, like, frustrated comments under your breath, you're probably right in this symptom, in this stage. And, it's not just like a casual, this person is annoying me today. It is like, seriously, you cannot stand the people that you're working with or your clients or whatever the case is. You're critical, you're cynical, you're just resentful with them, and it just results in a very negative and rude attitude towards those people. Okay, so those are the first 3 common symptoms for a burnout, just to see if you recognize yourself in any of those. It is time for a little bit of a break, but when we get back, I'm going to jump into the 5 stages of a burnout. Okay, so there's 5 main stages. I'm going to go through the symptoms of those stages as well, just once again, so you can recognize anything in your life. And then I will jump into some surprising causes of a burnout. And then, of course, I'm going to round off today's episode with how to prevent a burnout, how to get out of that state. I do have some studies that I want to share with you. So I got lots of good information. So don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Hello, we are back and we're talking all about burnouts, okay? So basically you're working your butt off, you're overloading your schedule, overloading your work schedule to be specific so much that you're working around the clock that you burn yourself out. And this is so common, it can happen to everybody. It is different for everybody usually, but there are some common threads when it comes to a burnout with most people. So let's talk about the 5 stages of a burnout. So the first stage is called the honeymoon phase, okay? And this just means that when we're starting a new task, maybe it's even like starting your new job or just a task within your job. We usually start off by experiencing quite high job satisfaction, right? Say you just landed your dream job, you're so happy with what you're doing, like it is exciting, right? You're on this high of satisfaction. It's that commitment, it's the energy, it's that creativity, like you just feel like you are on cloud 9. And this is especially true like when you do have a new job role, right? You're just like flying through. This could also happen when you're just like given a project within your job. Or just the beginning of a business venture in general. So in this phase of a burnout, you may kind of experience predicted stresses of the job. So it's like important to start implementing positive coping strategies right from the beginning when you start a job. That's just a basic info in general, right? You gotta make sure that you are handling your stress no matter what. So you gotta take the practical steps, in your job. You gotta prioritize your mental health. Basically the theory is that if we do create good coping strategies at this stage, we can continue the honeymoon phase forever. But that is not super easy or super common. So some of these symptoms, it's that job satisfaction, readily accepting responsibility. You have sustained energy levels, just so much optimism, like just so much, commitment to the job, compulsion to prove yourself, free-flowing creativity, and then high productivity levels. So basically, this is where you're at your high, you're feeling good, and you're just on cloud 9, you're loving everything about your job. Now, the second stage of a burnout is an onset of stress. This means that the burnout begins with an awareness, basically, of some days being more difficult than others, okay? So you may find that your optimism is kind of slowing down a little bit. You also just might notice common stress symptoms that are affecting you physically, mentally, or emotionally. This is all different to different people. So some of these symptoms would be like high blood pressure, inability to focus, irritability, job dissatisfaction, lack of sleep or reduced sleep quality, lack of social interaction, lower productivity. You can have anxiety, avoidance of decision making. That's a big one. A change in your appetite or your diet, fatigue, forgetfulness, neglect of your own personal needs. Grinding your teeth at night can actually be a symptom of this. Headaches and heart palpitations. So basically in this set, you are working so hard. You're pushing yourself to work harder, even though you're already starting to feel like you're wearing down a little bit. But some days are easier and some days are harder. So you're just pushing yourself even harder to get through those days in that scenario. So this is really, really common. This is where kind of at this stage, if you do not become aware, then you are going to spiral down into the next 3 stages. I find that, if you do hit the onset of stress and you really do find those healthy coping mechanisms, that we can avoid spiraling into the next 3 steps, but that's easier said than done. So number 3 is chronic stress. So this is the 3rd stage, and this is marked, basically, it's a huge change in your stress levels. It's going from motivation to experiencing stress on an incredibly frequent basis. You also might experience more intense symptoms than the symptoms in stage 2. Basically, it's stage 2, but enhanced. So now you're not just pushing yourself to work hard. You are literally dragging your butt to work hard. You're constantly stressed. You are not sleeping well, right? You're lacking your hobbies. You're missing your work deadlines because you're so stressed out, which stresses you out more, and it comes full circle. You just are so tired all the time. Physical illness too, right? This can really affect your body. Procrastination at work and at home. Lateness for work. This is also a cause of stress, and you're probably not sleeping well. Resentfulness. Social withdrawal from your friends and your family. You can become very angry or aggressive behavior because of this chronic stress. Just chronic exhaustion, like constantly dragging your butt everywhere, a cynical attitude, denial of problems at work, at home too. You're kind of just going into denial at this stage, and you don't even realize how much pressure you are putting on yourself, and you just deny everything. You're feeling very pressured. You also feel maybe out of control. This can also increase your alcohol or drug consumption at this stage, or an increased caffeine consumption, because you're trying to kind of outweigh that exhaustion, right? So you're trying to up your caffeine, and then you can also turn to drugs and alcohol as kind of a coping mechanism, which of course is not healthy for us. So that's stage number 3. Stage number 4, you see how we're kind of building up here? So stage number 4 is the burnout. You're probably like, what? How is that not the last stage? Because it could get worse. So this stage it's where the symptoms become very critical. And when a burnout is talked about more generally, this is the stage that it's often kind of referred to, okay? So basically, you continuing on with your life as normal, as like your normal routine, has now become impossible. Your regular morning routine, you going to work on time, your work routine, your night routine, your social routine, everything, your daily activities are not possible. And this is where a lot of people can confuse this with depression, because when you're very depressed, you don't really want to get out of bed. You don't really stick with your routine, right? You're just kind of, your life is different, right? You're not able to keep up with your daily habits. So same with a burnout. Now this is basically like you are not able to keep up with your daily habits. You are just so exhausted. You are so resentful. You're angry. You feel very empty inside. Like there are signs of depression within this stage. So you obsess over your problems, or you obsess over your problems at work or in your just social life. You have a pessimistic outlook on work and life. Physical symptoms can really intensify or increase. You got self-doubt, social isolation, behavioral changes, chronic headaches, chronic stomach or bowel problems, right? Like when we get into this bad of a mental state, it really, really affects our physical bodies, right? So we neglect of our personal needs. We desire to kind of just drop out of our lives, out of society. We maybe want to move away from our friends or family. Like this is kind of, think of symptoms of depression, and this is kind of what a burnout is like. But it's really just vital exhaustion. Your body is not able to keep up with your regular routines and daily habits. So now the stage 5 of a burnout, and this is called the habitual burnout. So basically this means that the symptoms of a burnout are so embedded into your life that you are likely to experience a significant physical or emotional problem. As to oppose like just occasionally feeling this stress or a burnout, this is where you fall into depression. This is where you might have anxiety. This is where things get more serious. You can have a physical serious illness now, right? Basically, the burnout was like stage 4. The burnout was like at peak. And now this is like, you've really pushed it. Like it's in your life. It's a part of your life right now. So chronic sadness, depression, chronic mental fatigue, chronic physical fatigue, like just basically all of those stages, and amplify it by 1,000. So those are the 5 stages of a burnout. Now you can kind of recognize exactly what a burnout is. Maybe you recognize some aspects in your life or somebody else's life. This is just good to know because it can happen to us at any time. We never know when our work life is going to change or when we're going to get another big workload or whatever the case is. This can happen at any time. That's why it's so important to recognize these symptoms and these stages so that you can be aware of those things and then help yourself climb out of those stages of that burnout and get back on track to living your life to the happiest and the fullest, because that's what I'm here to help you do. So it is time for another break, but don't go anywhere. When we get back from the break, I am going to share some surprising causes of a burnout. I'm going to share a study that was published in the Personality and Individual Differences Journal. And then I'm going to, of course, jump into ways that we can prevent a burnout in our lives. So lots of information to share with you. Don't go anywhere. I will be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast. We are in the last stretch of today's episode. We're talking all about burnouts, and now I'm going to jump in how we can prevent burnout. But I'm going to be telling you about some surprising causes of a burnout that may surprise you or not surprise you, I'm not sure. But here are 3 causes of a burnout. So the pressure to achieve. So when bosses, teachers, coaches, they hold such high standards, usually we rise to the occasion and we meet those standards, right? And we achieve them because somebody believed we could do it. Somebody set those standards for us. But at a certain point, very high standards can actually really hurt us. And this includes your own high standards as well. So that means that perfectionism in you, that perfectionist is causing burnouts because you're striving for perfection. You're striving for all these things all the time, 100%, 24/7. That is super difficult to do, to reach those high standards all of the time. And if you're always reaching extreme high standards, you are going to burn yourself out. Now, this is not to scare you away from setting high standards. Of course, we need to set high standards for ourselves, but we have to find that balance. We have to know where that line is for ourselves. Now, number 2 is mindless social media consumption. So a study that was just published in the Journal of Health Psychology, it found that the social media use at work actually tends to increase burnout in individuals who are lower in mindfulness, and those of us who scroll through Facebook or Instagram as a distraction or that filler in our lives or when we're bored. And then for those who have higher levels of mindfulness, social media was a burnout buffer. So basically, if you are more mindful of yourself and you can catch yourself of these things of using social media at the workplace, it doesn't always have to result in a burnout. But if you're the type of person who is not as mindful with these things, this can actually contribute to you having a burnout. So I guess don't use social media at work. Number 3 is pessimism. So it's not all from external factors. It can come from just within ourselves, right? So there was a study that was posted in the Journal of Personality and Individual Differences, and it asked over 1,000 participants to read 24 short scenarios. 6 of them were job-related, and all of which were ambiguous, and they could be interpreted positively or negatively. So for example, it says, you are going to see a very good friend at the station. You haven't seen them for years. You feel emotional, thinking about how much they might have changed. And then the next participants were asked to rate how pleasant each scene was in their mind's eyes. So an image of feeling anxious and sad about how the friend might have changed would rate lower, while an image of feeling excited and affectionate about the arriving friend might be rated higher. So because all of these scenarios were ambiguous, the unpleasant ratings reflected a tendency to see the glass as half empty, while pleasant ratings reflected a tendency to see the glass as half full. So it turns out that the pessimistic interpretations, so seeing the glass as half empty, coupled with that burnout. So there you have it. Those are kind of 3 causes of a burnout. So that pressure to achieve, the mindless social media consumption, especially at work, and then pessimism. So those are the 3 I wanted to share with you. Now let's jump into ways that we can prevent a burnout for ourselves. So time management is huge. Make your schedule, make your routine, and stick to it. Especially if you are an entrepreneur, a business owner, a freelancer, you make your own schedule. It is so important to make sure that you're setting work hours for yourself. If you want to be at the office from 8 to 4, be at the office from 8 to 4. But that means that you're done work at 4 p.m. and you get to go home and you get you to do the other aspects of your life. Time management is so important. You have to care about your time. Time is valuable and you have to care about it. And if you have good time management, it'll definitely help you prevent a burnout. My next step for you is just separating your home and office. So one of the most common ways that burnouts occur is through work creep. So what a work creep means is that's like when your professional responsibilities, any of your duties that you have to do at work, start to creep into your social life, your out of office life. So it could be in the evening, it could be over the weekends, it could be on vacation, and that's a sign that a burnout is coming soon because you're overworking, right? You're overworking that clock. And people who work at home are most susceptible. So, there's the dividing line between work and family time. It's especially when you're working from home, that could literally just mean a closed door from work to family time. Especially right now during a pandemic, I'm sure all of us are experiencing kind of this situation where we really have to try harder to find that separation. So one way of avoiding this creep is by just disconnecting. So if your phone and laptop are always on and like ready while you're at home, you're never really going to be leaving the office, right? So disconnect from those things. Make that effort to fully unplug from the job when you're on your own time. And then you'll really notice a shift in how much you get from your time at home. And this relaxing time, your time at home, your socializing time is supposed to energize you, right? It's supposed to like fuel your body so you're ready for another work day tomorrow, right? You got to have that difference in your life. Also, just focusing your attention on different aspects of your life. This is just going to help you feel, more creative when it's time to work again, more productive when it's time to work again. So make sure you are separating your social and your work life. Number 3 is exercise. This is huge. Exercise is so good for us, right? And like my next tip too is eat a balanced diet. These are tips that I could give you for basically every subject that I talk about on this podcast, but it's true. Exercise and eating a well-balanced diet is so important for our mind and our body. If you want to avoid a burnout, you have to make sure that you are fueling your body properly. This is so crucial. So make sure that you are exercising, because this is also letting out that stress. This is a great stress management activity that you can do. Go for a run, go for a walk, go to the gym, do some yoga in your house. I don't care what it is. Just get some movement, get some exercise, and then of course, eating a well-balanced diet, getting those nutrients that we need, making sure we're staying hydrated, making sure that you're also enjoying life though too. If you want a piece of cake, have a piece of cake. You don't need that extra stress of trying to restrict yourself of all these different foods. My next one is just keep good sleep habits. This is huge when it comes to a burnout, because we need to make sure that we are sleeping well. This is huge for our overall health. This is, again, another tip that I could give you for almost every single subject we talk about on this podcast. But because sleep is so important, you have to let your body rest. You have to let your mind rest so that you are ready for the next work day. So making sure that you're keeping that sleep schedule, making sure that you're staying on your sleep cycle. So trying to go to bed at the same time and waking up at the same time every single day, that can hugely make a difference in your life. And number 6 is asking for help. So don't be afraid to ask for help. Do not be afraid to, when you're at work and you feel like you don't have to do everything by yourself. You really don't. Even if you're the boss or you're not, you can ask for help, and there's nothing to be ashamed of for asking for help, especially if it's going to help you prevent a burnout. Because think of it this way. Asking for help is going to make you a lot more productive. It's going to make you a lot less lot more stress-free than if you have a burnout and then you're kind of out of commission for a while because you've let yourself fall into that burnout. So if you want to be productive, you want to get things done, do not be afraid to ask for help. And then my last one for you is just take a vacation, take time off. Scheduling time off is so important, especially if you have an extremely busy work life. Schedule that time off for yourself. Make the effort to make sure that you are taking your breaks, taking your time, because even if it's a weekend, we can't always get away for a week or anything, but even if it's just a weekend where you unplug, you get out of town for a couple days and you just rewind, you relax. This is going to help reset your mind, your body, to help prevent that burnout in your life. So there you have it. Those are all the tips I have for you. That is all the information that I have for you today on a burnout. I hope this was beneficial. I hope maybe you recognize some things in your life maybe, and now you can implement those tips on how to prevent that burnout, because it's inevitable. It can happen to any of us at any time. So it's so important to know, to be aware of those symptoms and those signs, and then of course how we can prevent those things so that we can continue to go after our goals, but in a healthy way. We can continue to stay focused in a healthy way, achieve all those things, but staying on track with our health, our mind, our physical, everything, right? So there you have it. Thank you so much for listening to GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Alyssa Jo. I had an amazing time sharing today's information with you, just like always. Thank you so much for being here. Please do not forget to hit that subscribe button. I've got new episodes out every single Monday and Thursday. Head over to our social media channels. I post on there regularly, so go like and follow on our social media channels, and then of course leave a 5-star review. I love reading the reviews and it helps immensely. So thank you so much. Till next time, stay happy, stay positive, and take time to relax. Thank you.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find the show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from sex and relationships to health and wellness, life and happiness, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Life and Happiness Podcast.